With the Resident Evil 8 DLC dropping in just a few weeks, in this video I will be covering everything you need to know about it. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Out of the many inclusions for the Resident Evil 8 DLC, the new third-person mode has been eye-catching for many, as it will allow players to re-experience this game in a new over-the-shoulder perspective. It was later stated at the TGS demonstration that this third-person mode will be very similar to the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes. Now, nothing has been mentioned about the dodge mechanic from the RE3 remake returning in RE8, but I would say it's pretty unlikely since the game already features the guard and kick mechanic. Now, it has been mentioned in an interview that Capcom has worked really hard to make sure that the player can't see Ethan's face in this new third-person perspective. Because of this, all of the cutscenes in the third-person game mode will be viewed in the first-person perspective. Now, to be honest, I'm not really sure why they even bothered continuing to hide his face. The whole point of concealing Ethan was to fully immerse players with a first-person point of view, but now that the game can be played in a third-person perspective, it kinda just defeats the purpose. Not only that, but because of many modders in the community, everyone already knows what Ethan looks like, so it's very interesting to hear that they're doing all this extra work just to hide Ethan's face. Regardless, this new third-person mode will undoubtedly be less scary than the first-person mode. The player will get a wider view, they will be able to see what's behind Ethan, and the player can freely move around but quickly turn in the opposite direction. It will definitely bring much more security to some people who may find the first-person perspective too scary. Lastly, for anyone wondering, Capcom has confirmed that Resident Evil 7 will not be getting its own third-person mode, as they stated that the game was intended to be played in the first-person perspective for the most thrilling experience possible. Another significant addition to the Resident Evil 8 expansion would be all of the added mercenaries content. This will include 3 additional characters and 2 new stages. The 3 new characters are going to be Chris, Lady D, and Heisenberg, and they will all possess new and unique abilities to take out hordes of enemies. Chris Redfield will be able to punch, which will knock back all enemies in his range. He will also be able to use a target locator to call in an aerial strike to significantly damage nearby enemies. Heisenberg will be able to wield a powerful hammer that can be charged up to unleash a devastating counterattack. Based off the gameplay trailer, it seems that he can also shoot jolts of electricity out of his hand, summon a part of his robot army into battle, and is able to launch a saw blade at enemies. Lady D will be given the ability to summon her 3 daughters to aid her in battle. She can also unleash devastating attacks with her long claws. She can throw furniture and will be able to use some sort of targeted attack with her hand. As for the 2 maps, one will be located in Moreau's Reservoir, and the other will be located at the hidden location near Otto's Mill. To be honest, I personally wasn't too big of a fan of the mercenaries mode in RE8, but the additions that Capcom is adding to the game mode seem very promising and gets me super excited to give mercenaries another shot. Shadows of Rose will be the core addition to the DLC, which will entail a story mode for Rose to explore. In the years following Ethan Winter's sacrifice, his daughter Rose has survived in protective custody, but her status as a mutant has left her as an outcast and she is being labeled as a freak by other children. At the age of 16, Rose gains access to a surviving piece of the Black God and seeks to use it to forever suppress her powers and live her life as a human. During her attempt, her mind interacts with the Black God and she begins to see scattered memories of the humans it has consumed and archived over the centuries. During this hallucinatory experience, Rose encounters her own doppelganger and is drawn away by a hallucinatory figure called Michael, who promises to find her what she needs. During the game, Michael will communicate with Rose in her struggle against the Black God inside Megamycete's consciousness. Due to not having a physical form, Michael communicates through a series of written messages. Deeper into the story, Rose will encounter the Black God's memories of people such as the Duke, who take on a darker tone compared with their real-world counterparts. It has been said in an interview that there is a big mystery at the heart of Shadows of Rose, but all will be revealed by the end of the experience. All of the creatures and characters you encounter in Shadows of Rose will have deeper meanings than they may first be apparent. Playing the DLC a second time after you discover the truth of the mystery may give you a different perspective on the experiences as a whole. Along with this, they mention that not all creatures you meet in Shadows of Rose are harmful to the player, and part of the DLC is figuring out which creatures and characters are there to help and hurt you. Now, it has also been stated that Shadows of Rose DLC is considered the conclusion of the Winters family arc, which is quite interesting. Due to the circumstances, many people assume that Rose will be returning in Resident Evil 9 and team up with Chris to take out all of the bioweapons that the BSAA has created. There was even a lot of fan speculation that Ethan was still alive and will be returning in Resident Evil 9 as well. Unfortunately, that will not be the case, as this Shadows of Rose DLC will finish the Winter winter story. This has definitely been sad news for some, but great news for many. With the winter story arc being complete, it is very well possible that we could see some of the long-awaited members from the old cast return in Resident Evil 9. With the ending displaying Chris's vengeance for the BSAA, it is very likely that the setup for RE9 will be Chris and his Hound Wolf squad infiltrating the BSAA. And since Jill is a part of the BSAA, many people have been speculating that we could see Jill return in the next mainline title. Well-known insider Duskalm has stated in the past that Resident Evil 9 will have the longest development time and budget when compared to any other RE game. Because of this, it does seem very likely that Capcom has something very special in store for the next mainline title, but only time will tell. Now, when it comes to gameplay for Shadows of Rose, there will be a fair amount of different areas to explore. The first environment explored in the game is Castle Dimitrescu, which will consist of the opening act of the story mode, with Rose continuing on to other locations later on. There will also be a swampland, which appears at an undefined point. The castle is a darkly lit version of what is played in the main game. Some of the doors that were accessible in the main game are now locked doors that may need keys or bolt cutters to open, meaning players familiar with Village must learn new routes. When navigating the map, Rose will be given clues from Michael in the form of a magical writing which appears on the walls. To add pressure onto the player, Rose runs at a slower speed than Ethan and Chris, which is in part intended to compel the player to use her powers more. The entire Shadows of Rose story will roughly take 4 hours to complete, meaning it will be the longest Resident Evil DLC we have ever seen. One of the core elements of gameplay for this mode is its item scarcity. Unlike Ethan and Chris in the main game, Rose is physically weak, cannot use the guard mechanic, and only has access to a handgun with limited ammunition and health items. Instead, the primary means of combat is the use of Rose's ice powers, which can be used to stun and evade enemies, as well as destroy objects carrying items or serving as obstacles. Rose's powers manifest in new forms over the course of the game, including one ability to slow down time. Several enemies from the main game will reappear in this mode, but there will be a few new enemies as well. One of these enemies is known as Face Eater, which is a molded-like enemy residing within the world of consciousness. As the name states, these enemies will grab a hold of Rose and consume her face. Aside from this, there has been one other creature shown off, though we have yet to receive any explanation behind the enemy. It has also been confirmed that these two enemies aren't the only exclusive enemies we will see in Shadows of Rose. It has been stated that there will be a few more, but they will be revealed at a later date, most likely during the upcoming Capcom showcase. Now, in terms of damage, the weapons in Shadows of Rose have not been weakened from Village, though the increasing agility of the Face Eaters makes it hard to land a clear shot. The goal is to survive, not to necessarily kill everything. Rose is not good with guns, nor is she much of an athlete. She's a 16-year-old teenage girl who wants to live a normal life. She moves a bit slower, aims a bit worse, and her ice powers will be more used for personal support with a defensive focus. Rose's powers will also be used in puzzles for the DLC. They stated that they want there to be a sense of growth with Rose in her character as her powers grow during the DLC piece itself. In some recent interviews, we were able to learn quite a few interesting details about the development of Shadows of Rose. Before release, director Kinoshita devised 4 possible scenarios for the DLC, including a Chris-centric story related to Not a Hero DLC from Resident Evil 7, and a Rose story tying into the main game's epilogue sequence. With all of the positive fan reception to Rose post-release, Kinoshita decided to go with his Rose pitch and build a story around the feedback. Kinoshita was impressed with Village's gothic horror and dark fantasy tones, and wanted to lean even harder on that for Shadows of Rose. They describe it as psychological horror meets a dark fairy tale, mixed with a nightmarish fever dream. The DLC is made to be harder to survive than most Resident Evil games, which is quite interesting to say the least. Shadows of Rose is looking more and more promising every time we receive new information. To be honest, I really wasn't digging the whole concept at first, since I was really hoping for an Ada Wong DLC, but after learning more about it with the recent info we have received, I really think that this Resident Evil 8 DLC will be a great and enjoyable experience. But anyways, this has been everything you need to know about the Resident Evil 8 DLC. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.